Hello, my name is Ian Munford. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to be talking about one of the most disruptive trends in the entertainment market, which is now commonly and often referred to as OTT, or over the top. It's a topic we get asked about daily at Akamai, and something that, as a company, we obviously focus on. What are the audience trends? What are the key innovations and disruptions in the market? And of course, how do we respond to those disruptions? When I look at OTT, it's a term that's been bandied around the industry for a while. In the past, we used terms like streaming media or digital media and so on. So OTT is not a new concept, rather a new way of expressing something that's been around for many years. What has changed, though, is its adoption curve for viewers and also the sophistication of the technology available to deliver content online. And so today, I want to navigate through the OTT landscape, how we got here, explore what's next for OTT, which we're calling OTT 2.0. Talk about what are the main components and considerations within this next generation of OTT. And then talk about some of the considerations that you need to be aware of as you start to deploy and develop your own strategies. So starting off, let's level set. What is OTT? Well, there's lots of definitions out there, but the most simplistic one that I can think of is this. It's the broadcasting of premium audio, video, and other media over the internet without control or ownership of the distribution network. And it's that second part, without control or ownership of the distribution network, that makes OTT very different from other forms of TV delivery. TV, be it IPTV, be it DTH, cable, or satellite, control and ownership of the network is a core part of that strategy. Not having control or ownership of the network creates a little bit of a modern-day Wild West as far as video is concerned. How do you bring order, predictability, security, and performance to something that's largely non-owned, or at least non-owned and controlled by a single entity? That's what OTT providers have to deal with every day, and this clearly is what we focus on as Akamai. In Europe, we're seeing the adoption of OTT services starting to mature. Watching long-form content now outstrip short-form clips. There's obviously still scope for growth, but adoption in many countries is now at very high levels. More importantly, usage patterns are also starting to change. We're seeing OTT becoming the normal way to access TV catch-up services. We're seeing the growth of subscription services continue to supplement and complement linear TV. Before we delve into the future of OTT, I think we really need to start with looking at linear TV technology, as the goal for OTT 1.0 was to be nothing more than TV-like. Well, many argue that TV technology, as of today, has reached its plateau. It's maxed out its potential. If you've been to any consumer electronics shop, you'd have heard of ultra-high def or 4K. But this is not something that's being delivered at scale using linear TV technology today. Audio experiences also tend to be stereo, maybe 5.1, but nothing that has the notion of height or a 3D surround to it. Clearly, these can be overcome in a linear TV world, but that would be very capital intensive. Beyond the viewing experience, you've got interactivity and personalization. Linear TV is a very passive experience, often referred to as lean back. And this is absolutely fine at certain times, such as the family settling down to watch a movie. But some content genres, such as sport or children's programming, and even entertainment programming, can be an interactive experience, or certainly interactivity can enhance the experience. And engagement really drills down to the heart of TV's commercial model, which we'll talk about later. But suffice to say, the lack of engagement with content or adverts is something that linear services are not able to accomplish, and therefore its potential has plateaued. So what is OTT 1.0? How do we define it, and what are those limitations? Well, firstly, the business strategy for OTT 1.0 was and is very much centered around complementing television. The experience, the goal, the aspiration for OTT 1.0 was always to be television-like. And television-like is really one of the hindrances of OTT 1.0, as it has the artificial bar to be as good as television, but nothing more. So OTT 1.0 has an artificial ceiling in terms of resolutions and frame rates and bit rates. The OTT 1.0 world is also predominantly on-demand content or catch-up content, with a lot of user-generated content mixed in as well. But interestingly, very limited live content. And whilst we have to recognise there are still many rights and commercial issues forcing this, the number of companies, broadcasters that have taken the plunge and enabled live delivery of their linear channels using OTT technology is actually quite limited. So let's back up and look at the business strategies being adopted in a 1.0 world. Well, the first decision as a rights owner is typically, do I go direct to my viewers, or do I go via an aggregator, such as Amazon Prime, or both? The second concern was, how was I going to deliver my content? Was that video on demand or live linear? Then I need to think about access models and monetization models. Was this going to be authenticated, i.e. subscription-based, or is this going to be non-authenticated and use advertising models? And clearly, if I'm funded through license fees, then neither of these actually apply. But as we've discussed, there's been very limited live content. There's also been very limited engagement of the audience from an ad perspective, such as personalization of ad content. And so we see the taxonomy of OTT 1.0 as being restricted typically to a VOD experience with some user-generated content. And whilst most companies started with a direct model, we're now seeing many more embrace content aggregators and run a dual strategy, both of which need to be supported going forward. So if we step back and come up with a scorecard for OTT 1.0, how do we rank it versus more traditional linear TV services? Well, the first thing to point out is they all score very well on quality. OTT 1.0 fell short of that quality bar, but that was based on the aspirations of the time. It was meant to be like TV, but not television. And so the quality metric in 1.0 just didn't hit the bar. If you look at viewer engagement, OTT 1.0 started to see some improvements, especially later in its term, but it was still not as good as linear TV. From a scale perspective, it's very difficult to rival the scale of linear technology, and so it lacks there also. And from a monetization perspective, we started to see the same trend. So really, when you compare OTT 1.0, it was hamstrung by its definition, and its remit to be television-like. It was the lowest bar in television, if you will. Well, expectations have changed. In the early days of streaming in late 90s, online video was a novelty. When we got into early 2000s, video started to shift from a novelty to a nice-to-have. But then as we started to undergo the standard def to high def transition in OTT, we really start to see the early phases of business expectations rising from an OTT delivery perspective. We start looking at OTT in a more mature way and place more requirements on basically on the distribution functionality. But the key question still to ask is, how do businesses build around that future? And that's really what we're here to talk about today. OTT 2.0 is the future, and it's being powered by momentum that will change the face of TV forever. Europe is ready. There's more high-speed broadband connectivity. It's by no means everywhere, but we're seeing ever-increasing bit rates and service stability ready for high-quality services. It's being powered by the number of devices, over 5 billion connected at the end of 2015. And I'm sure we can all contest this by looking at the number of devices we have in our homes. So we've got this perfect scenario of better internet connectivity and more devices, but most importantly, a real change in viewer behavior and needs. This is something pay television services and OTT really didn't contemplate. The best example I can think of is binge watching. 9 out of 10 people binge watch content today. This wasn't even around at scale a few years ago, but it's now considered very commonplace. So how do we adapt to this notion of more connectivity, more devices, and different behaviors? So let's talk a little bit about OTT 2.0 so we can get a better understanding of why we need a new definition. Well, it starts with the transition of audience. we're heading towards a crossover where more people will be watching content through OTT services than linear. We need to think about scale, audiences with high quality expectations, and certainly a large leap from where we are today. The second point to note is that we had a major flaw in OTT 1.0 in that it really centered on video on demand content. We had an unbalanced offering, and the missing element was linear programming. And by linear programming, I mean 24/7 programming. But that gap is really something we're looking to address with OTT 2.0. Now, there's a lot of debate on what's the role of linear television in OTT. You've got companies like Netflix saying linear television will be replaced in a 10 to 20 year window. A lot of things will be replaced in a 10 to 20 year window, but I don't think schedules will be one of them. People still expect to watch content in a passive way. Colin Dixon from Endscreen Media also thinks that linear schedules will have a place online as part of OTT 2.0. And when you start looking at Netflix numbers, it makes you question, can a one-dimensional strategy really survive? So we'll start to see OTT 2.0 services delivering live, video on demand, and linear content becoming the new norm. If you look at content engagement between different devices, phones and tablets, etc., the time difference spent watching that content typically goes up by about 80%. Desktop adds another 50%, and it goes up again as viewers start to use smart TVs. So the experience really does matter. We also talked about how OTT 1.0 was hamstrung with very little premium content. We won't see that affecting OTT 2.0. We have a lot of premium content out there already, and I've called out a few brands where that content is available now, online and available at the highest quality. It's also available without the usual window restriction. So OTT 2.0 is really overcoming some of the content barriers. But it's not just about audio and video. OTT 2.0 can also help us to build up highly immersive experiences. That's much more than just audio and video alone. There's a lot of exciting technology to engage viewers well beyond the capabilities of 1.0 and well beyond the capabilities of pay television. There's several examples that we see of this in the market today. And sport in particular has embraced this tremendously. Formula One, as an example, has gone through tremendous efforts getting telemetry out there beyond the audio and video and letting the fan pick what type of experience they really want. So when we look at the taxonomy for OTT 2.0, it's much richer, much more complete compared to what we had before. We've added the need to think about live linear experiences, the need to think about personalized ad experiences, perhaps telemetry for sport or social media engagement. The richness of OTT 2.0 provides the opportunity to say, I want these services to stand apart from what's available today. The experience is richer, and it really raises the bar that maybe we've exhibited or we've had to deal with to date. So there are lots of moving parts when we talk about OTT 2.0. We've talked about some of the trends and some of the limitations in pay television, and some of the limitations really inherent with OTT services that we've had to date. But how do we get to this great new experience easily, cost-effectively, and most importantly, reliably? What are the primary components that you need to consider when you start looking at OTT 2.0? Well, in OTT 1.0, we were all focused on distribution. We wanted to get content out to as many devices as possible and deliver the best experience possible or available with the technology that we had. And this was absolutely the strategy, the right strategy for our 1.0 era. With OTT 2.0, the dynamic is much more complex, as expectations are much higher. How do we ensure we have a more cohesive end-to-end workflow? How do we ensure that content is being prepared in the best available versions? And then how do we integrate our delivery and workflow technology with business analytics, content management systems, or monetization systems? In the OTT 2.0 world, no component should be looked at as a standalone entity. Everything should be looked at through the lens of resiliency, scale, and performance. We often get asked, is it easier or harder to do video on demand or live content? Well, live, as illustrated here, has many more functional blocks. There's just a lot more going on in live. We need to consider things like encoding, live transcoding, and packaging at scale. So on-demand is an easier problem to solve, and really that's the genesis of why we had OTT 1.0 centered around on-demand content. Now let's just do a quick review on how Akamai maps onto these requirements. Well, clearly we do a lot of video distribution. We also ingest and package tens of thousands of hours of live content, as well as processing millions of hours of on-demand content all the time. Akamai also provides our customers with a range of analytics. And more importantly, as we announced at NAB, our broadcast operation and control center addresses some of the improvements required by our customers for better visibility and telemetry in live workflows. But what else do we need for an OTT 2.0 platform? Well, we believe an organization needs to have visibility of and take responsibility for the end-to-end workflow, especially for live content. So key areas of the OTT 2.0 workflow include signal acquisition and encoding. We believe new ingest acceleration technology is required for live content so that transcoding and packaging can take place at scale in the cloud. We believe new workflow capabilities are required for rights blackout or for regional program replacement. We believe new acceleration technologies are required to ensure 4K resolution content can be delivered without fail at scale. We also believe new ad insertion practices will be required to ensure a seamless but very personalized experience for viewers. And finally, we believe new distribution technology, such as multicasting, is going to be required to ensure high-quality video can be delivered at scale cost-effectively. And of course, the entire workflow needs to be managed and monitored to ensure the highest possible quality. So what does a scorecard look like now in light of this new OTT 2.0 experience? Well, the bar is now much higher than it is in linear TV. We now have the ability to deliver 4K content, higher resolution content, higher frame rate content, without the encumbrances of linear TV and without the limitations of OTT 1.0. And that's why this is an area of real disruption. From an engagement perspective and personalization of content, OTT 2.0 is leaps and bounds above anything that we've seen today in pay TV or OTT 1.0. Scale becomes one of those areas that we consistently have to challenge. What does happen if 700-odd million viewers come in and start watching a highly engaging experience at 10 megabits per second? Linear TV still has the advantage here. But at Akamai, we're investing in new client technology to help make sure that we can maintain quality at scale, regardless of the audience size. We've got a lot of work to do ahead of us for OTT 2.0, and there's definitely room to grow. When we look at monetization, this is another area I think there's a little bit of room to grow with OTT 2.0. Addressability and one-to-one addressability for adverts is absolutely on the cards. Ad delivery in the new world will be richer than we've seen in traditional pay TV, and absolutely richer than OTT 1.0. But ad tech is something which is still developing, and we're going to continue to see lots of investment. And then finally, I think one of the big differentiations with 2.0 is personalization. How do we curate the right content to the right person, on the right device, on the right network, at the right time? This is something that's very unique to OTT. It requires a vast host and range of metadata and an extreme amount of platform intelligence. But this is an area that we're investing in heavily at Akamai and something that you need to consider in your content strategy going forward. So what are some of the final considerations as we look forward to OTT 2.0? Well, we still have our business decisions as we talked about in the previous taxonomy. You still have to decide on the right distribution strategy. Is it direct to consumer? Is it through an aggregator? Or is it both? Are you going to go with a one-dimensional strategy, much like what we saw with OTT 1.0, and focus on a singular type of content, like video on demand? Or are you going to continue to enrich that strategy and layer in live events or linear content? What's the commercial strategy going to be? Is it going to be authenticated or non-authenticated? Are you going to go with subscription services? Are you going to go with an ad-supported model, or is it going to be a hybrid model? But then we start looking at the workflow components, and we don't have as much flexibility. There has to be a maturity and a rigidness on how we evaluate the workflow end to end. If I was to offer 8 points to consider, I think we have to first start with workflow completeness. Does your workflow address all of the functional needs that you see today end to end? Do you have the appropriate level of visibility and telemetry into those functions to determine whether they are performing the way you expect them to? Having detailed telemetry is absolutely critical, not only at a singular function level, but also how they correlate to each other. Flexibility needs to be built into your workflow. There's going to be more disruption on the horizon. For example, H.265 or HEVC. And this is something that will be disruptive, but needs to be modeled into your workflow now. Reliability in OTT 2.0 has the same expectations as linear TV. We have to make sure the systems have high service level agreements, and we can deliver video in a very predictable fashion. Of course, high performance and scale matter as we're growing audiences. And finally, security can never be ignored. Are all of your systems secured end to end? But what happens if something does fail? How do you recover? Or more importantly, how do you avoid any interruption at all? So consider these 8 points as you go through your workflow, every single functional stage, and you'll have a successful OTT recipe. As we look forward, I implore you to tune into our future webinars, where we're going to address many of these 8 topics in much more detail. We'll look at workflow through various lenses, for video on demand, for live events, and linear. We'll look at the changing delivery landscape and new disruptive technologies with client playback. And then finally, and probably most importantly, we'll look at the analytics, the business intelligence, and the operations component of the end-to-end supply chain. So as I leave you today, I can't emphasize how excited we are at Akamai about this challenge. We've had a lot of transitions in the industry, going from black and white to color, from standard def to high def, from high def to ultra high def, and so on. As a viewer, your engagement is driven by the experience. The ceiling of how high the experience can go in OTT 2.0 is unrivaled. But we must start to look at quality throughout the workflow. We need to think about quality not just on a component level, but end-to-end through each of those 8 stages. Your distribution platform is no longer just a distribution platform. It's your OTT platform. It has your distribution in it. It has your live workflow in it. It has your video on demand workflow in it. And it has your analytics and your client technology in it as well. And with that, I'd like to thank you for tuning in today and open it up to questions. Thank you.